The man behind the hoodie. Marcus Taylor stood at the corner of the bustling downtown district, his hands wrapped around the straps of a simple messenger bag. The cold wind tugged at his faded hoodie and jeans, but Marcus barely noticed. His gaze was fixed on the elegant facade of the high-end boutique, Echelon Luxe, a name synonymous with opulence and refinement. This wasn't just any store. It was his store, his brainchild, his empire. But no one would guess that by looking at him now. Today wasn't about glory or recognition. Marcus had traded his tailored suits and polished shoes for this unassuming disguise for one purpose only: to test the integrity of his team. The boutique was one of many under the Echelon Luxe brand, but this flagship store held a special place in his heart. He had poured years of hard work into building it, starting from nothing but a vision. Now, as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, Marcus had everything he once dreamed of, except certainty about the people he trusted to represent his brand. He shifted the bag, which contained a plain box of fragrance samples, and took a deep breath. This was more than a test of employee professionalism. It was a mirror reflecting the company culture he had cultivated, or at least thought he had. Steeling himself, Marcus pushed open the pristine glass door. The gentle chime of the bell was immediately overshadowed by the sound of laughter. Two sales associates stood by the counter, engrossed in conversation. Their name tags read Laura and Derek. Two employees Marcus had heard about in meetings, but never interacted with directly. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice calm but deliberate. Laura glanced up briefly before turning her attention back to Derek. "You're at the wrong store," she said with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand. "The discount shop is down the block." Marcus paused, momentarily taken aback. He forced a polite smile. "I'm here to deliver some samples." Derek raised an eyebrow, his smirk laced with condescension. "Samples? For who?" "For your manager," Marcus replied evenly. Laura rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Manager? Sure. Why don't you take that box around to the back entrance where the deliveries go? This is a luxury store, not a charity drop-off." Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he maintained his composure. He had anticipated resistance, maybe even indifference, but the blatant disrespect stung more than he expected. He placed the box on the counter gently, meeting Laura's gaze. "I was instructed to leave it here," he said firmly. Laura sighed, as if his very presence was an inconvenience. She grabbed her phone and began scrolling, ignoring him entirely. Derek leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his smirk widening. "Do you even know what's in that box?" Derek asked mockingly. Marcus's jaw tightened. Luxury fragrance samples, top-tier blends we're testing for the new collection. Derek let out a short laugh. "Right. Like you'd know anything about that." The weight of their judgment hung heavy in the air. Marcus scanned the store. Sleek marble floors, ambient lighting, meticulously arranged displays of jewelry, watches, and designer handbags. Everything about Echelon Luxe screamed sophistication. Yet here were two employees acting like gatekeepers of an elite club, mocking someone they deemed unworthy. He took a slow breath, reminding himself of the purpose of this charade. This wasn't about pride or ego. It was about uncovering the truth. If these two treated a delivery person with such disdain, how did they treat actual customers who didn't meet their standards? Marcus straightened, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks in?" Laura glanced up from her phone, her brows furrowing in annoyance. "Look, we're busy. If you don't have anything to buy, you're wasting our time." Derek chuckled, adding, "Yeah, and we don't do free samples. Try your luck at the mall." Their words were cutting, but Marcus stayed rooted. He studied them carefully, noting every sneer, every dismissive gesture. They didn't know who he was, and that was the point. He wasn't here to flaunt his title, but to evaluate their character. And right now, it was failing miserably. The door chimed again, and a middle-aged woman walked in, her appearance modest but tidy. She glanced around the store with wide eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the grandeur. Laura's demeanor changed instantly. Her expression hardened, and she shot Derek a knowing look. "Can I help you?" Laura asked, her tone sharp. The woman hesitated, holding up a small envelope. "I received this gift card as a present, and I wanted to see if—" "Gift cards?" Derek interrupted with a scoff. "Yeah, those are for clearance items. You might want to check the sales section, if we even have anything left." The woman's face fell, her confidence shrinking under their scrutiny. Marcus felt a surge of anger rise within him. This was beyond unprofessional. It was cruel. "I believe she has every right to shop wherever she likes," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Laura turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "And who exactly are you to say that?" Marcus stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Just someone who believes in treating people with respect." Laura rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath. But Derek simply laughed. "All right, hero. You've delivered your box. Time to move along." Marcus didn't move. He watched as the woman clutched her envelope, clearly debating whether to stay or leave. The fire inside him burned hotter. He had seen enough. This wasn't just about poor customer service. This was about values, ethics, and the culture he thought he had instilled in his company. These employees weren't just failing him. They were failing the very essence of what Echelon Lux stood for. As Marcus stood there, he knew this was only the beginning. What came next would determine whether this boutique remained a symbol of excellence or became a cautionary tale about complacency and arrogance. One thing was certain. Laura and Derek had no idea who they were dealing with or how their actions were about to change their lives forever. Unmasking the truth. Marcus Taylor stood silently as the woman, still clutching her envelope, retreated toward the door. She cast a nervous glance at Laura and Derek, her hesitation visible. Marcus's heart sank as he watched her leave. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of unwarranted judgment. He felt a pang of guilt for not intervening further, but his resolve hardened. This wasn't over. Not yet. The door chimed again as she stepped out, leaving Marcus alone with the two sales associates. He adjusted the strap of his messenger bag, his mind racing. The mask of composure he wore wasn't for their benefit. It was for his own. Losing his temper now wouldn't serve the larger lesson he hoped to teach, not just to these employees, but to himself. He needed to know whether his company truly represented the values he had built it on. Derek turned to him, smirking. "Well, hero, looks like your damsel in distress left. Guess you're done saving the day." Laura chuckled, her phone still in hand. "Honestly, what is it with people like that? They wander in here thinking they can afford anything. It's like, read the room." Marcus forced a calm smile. "You know, it's funny. You talk about people not belonging here, but what exactly makes someone worthy of stepping into this store?" Derek raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by the question. "It's not rocket science. This is Echelon Lux. If you don't look the part, you don't belong. Simple." Laura added, "Yeah, this isn't some chain store at the mall. We cater to a certain clientele, people with taste, money, class. Not charity cases." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if mulling over their words. "So, appearances are everything to you?" Derek shrugged. "Pretty much. Why? You thinking of stepping up your game? No offense, but that hoodie isn't exactly screaming luxury." Marcus chuckled softly, his patience waning but his resolve firm. "Interesting perspective. And do you think everyone who walks in here feels welcomed by that attitude?" Laura frowned, clearly irritated by his persistence. "Look, are you here to deliver your box or lecture us? Because if it's the latter, I've got better things to do." Marcus met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I'm here to observe." Derek let out a short laugh. "Observe? What are you, some kind of secret shopper?" "Trust me, buddy, you're not fooling anyone." Laura smirked. "If he is, they're not paying him enough to dress like that." The pair burst into laughter, their mockery cutting through the otherwise pristine atmosphere of the store. Marcus didn't flinch. He had expected hostility, but the sheer arrogance on display was worse than he had anticipated. If this was how they treated him, he couldn't imagine how they handled customers who didn't meet their superficial standards. The door chimed again, and a tall man in a sleek suit walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Laura and Derek straightened, their laughter ceasing instantly. The man looked around, his expression one of quiet confidence. "Good afternoon," Laura said, her tone suddenly polished. "Welcome to Echelon Luxe. How can we assist you today?" The transformation was almost comical. Gone was the dismissive sarcasm. In its place was a rehearsed professionalism that felt as shallow as a puddle. Marcus watched silently as the man browsed the display cases, barely acknowledging their fawning attempts to assist him. "Interesting," Marcus muttered under his breath. "What's that?" Derek asked, his tone sharper now that he felt Marcus had overstayed his welcome. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. Just admiring how quickly things change around here." Laura shot him a warning look, clearly annoyed by his continued presence. "Look, if you're done playing delivery guy, maybe it's time you left. We've got real customers to take care of." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open. He scribbled something down, his movements deliberate. "What are you doing?" Derek asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "Taking notes," Marcus replied without looking up. "Notes?" Laura scoffed. "For what?" Marcus finally looked up, his gaze steady. "For a meeting I'll be having later." Derek exchanged a confused glance with Laura. "What kind of meeting?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he closed the notebook and placed it back into his bag. He picked up the box of samples from the counter and set it aside carefully, ensuring it wasn't in their way. "I'll leave you to your real customers," he said, his tone calm, but with an edge of finality. As he turned to leave, Derek called after him. "Hey, wait a second. Who are you anyway?" Marcus paused at the door, his hand resting on the handle. He turned back slowly, his expression unreadable. "Just someone who cares about how people are treated. You might want to keep that in mind." With that, he stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. The cold wind greeted him again, but this time it felt invigorating. Marcus took a deep breath, his thoughts a mix of disappointment and determination. He had seen enough for now. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his corner office overlooking the city skyline. The lights of the bustling metropolis stretched out before him, a testament to the ambition and hard work that had brought him to this point. But tonight, the view felt hollow. He opened his notebook, reviewing the notes he had taken during his visit. Each word was a reminder of the failure he had witnessed, a failure not just of 2 employees but of a culture he thought he had carefully cultivated. Reaching for his phone, he dialed the number of the store's manager, Cassandra Wells. She answered after 2 rings, her voice warm and professional. "Good evening, Mr. Taylor. How can I help you?" "Cassandra," Marcus said, his tone serious. "We need to talk about the flagship store." "Of course. Is something wrong?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Let's just say there are some issues that need immediate attention," Marcus replied. "I'll be conducting a review tomorrow morning. Please make sure everyone is present." Cassandra hesitated for a moment before responding. "Understood, sir. I'll make the arrangements." As he ended the call, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. Tomorrow would bring clarity, not just for Laura and Derek, but for the entire team. Marcus wasn't just unmasking 2 employees, he was unmasking the truth about his company. And he wouldn't stop until he ensured that Echelon Luxe stood for the values he had fought so hard to establish. Seeds of change. The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of Marcus Taylor's office, illuminating the meticulously designed space. Everything about it spoke of success, from the hand-carved mahogany desk to the abstract art adorning the walls. Yet Marcus's focus wasn't on his surroundings. His mind was locked on the events of the previous day and the meeting he had scheduled for this morning. As he sipped his coffee, Marcus reviewed his plan. He wasn't just going to reprimand Laura and Derek. That would be too simple and insufficient. What he had witnessed wasn't just a failure of two employees, but a symptom of a larger issue. This store was supposed to be a beacon of his values: respect, inclusivity, and excellence. Yet, somehow, those ideals had been lost in translation. At precisely 10 a.m., Marcus arrived at the flagship store. He entered through the same glass doors as the day before, dressed in his usual tailored suit and polished shoes. The air inside the boutique felt different, heavier, as though the walls themselves sensed the impending confrontation. Cassandra Wells, the store manager, greeted him near the entrance. A tall woman with a commanding presence, she exuded professionalism and warmth. Her sharp blazer and confident smile were a stark contrast to the dismissive attitudes he had encountered yesterday. "Mr. Taylor, welcome," she said, extending a hand. "The team is gathered in the back, as you requested." "Thank you, Cassandra," Marcus replied, shaking her hand firmly. "Before we head back, I want to ask you something." "Of course," she said, her expression attentive. Marcus studied her carefully. "How do you feel the team here is performing, particularly in terms of customer service?" Cassandra hesitated, her smile faltering slightly. "I believe the team does well in most areas, but there's always room for improvement." "Room for improvement," Marcus repeated, his tone measured. "Can you elaborate?" She glanced around, as though ensuring no one else could overhear. "Well, there have been a few complaints. Nothing too serious, but I've noticed some employees can be a bit selective in how they treat customers." "And how have you addressed this?" Marcus asked, his gaze unwavering. "I've spoken to them individually," she said quickly. "I've emphasized the importance of treating every customer with respect, regardless of appearances." Marcus nodded, filing her response away for later. "Thank you, Cassandra. Let's join the team." The two made their way to the back of the store, where the employees had gathered in a small conference room. Laura and Derek were among them, their faces lighting up with surprise when they saw Marcus. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus began, his voice steady but firm. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Marcus Taylor, the CEO of Echelon Luxe." The room fell silent, the weight of his presence sinking in. Laura and Derek exchanged uneasy glances, the smug confidence they had displayed yesterday nowhere to be seen. "I've called this meeting because I recently had the opportunity to experience firsthand how customers are treated in this store," Marcus continued, his eyes sweeping across the room. "And I have to say, I was deeply disappointed." A murmur rippled through the room. Cassandra stood off to the side, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus focused his gaze on Laura and Derek. "Yesterday, I came into this store dressed as an average delivery person. I wanted to see how our employees treat people who don't immediately fit the image of a luxury client. What I encountered was unacceptable." Laura's face paled, and Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus didn't stop. "I witnessed disrespect, condescension, and outright dismissal, not just toward me, but also toward a customer who had every right to be here. That is not what Echelon Luxe stands for." Derek cleared his throat, attempting to recover. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through Derek's protest. "I watched you dismiss a customer because she didn't fit your narrow view of what a luxury shopper should look like. I watched you judge and mock someone based solely on appearances, and I'm not just disappointed. I'm angry." The room was deathly silent. Laura stared at the floor, her confidence completely eroded. Derek's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a nervous frown. Echelon Luxe was built on the idea that luxury is about experience, not exclusivity, Marcus continued, his tone softening but retaining its edge. Our mission is to make every person who walks through these doors feel valued and respected, whether they're spending $10 or $10,000. What I saw yesterday was a betrayal of that mission." He turned to Cassandra. "Cassandra, as store manager, you bear some responsibility for this as well. It's your job to ensure these values are upheld every day." Cassandra nodded, her expression contrite. "I understand, sir. I take full responsibility." "Good," Marcus said, "because things are going to change. Starting today." He addressed the room again. "There will be mandatory training sessions for all employees, focusing on inclusivity, professionalism, and customer engagement. And as for those who fail to meet these standards, there will be no place for them at Echelon Lux." Laura and Derek exchanged another nervous glance, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. "But before we move forward," Marcus said, his gaze locking onto Laura and Derek, "I want to hear from you. Do you think your actions yesterday reflect the values of this company?" Laura hesitated, her face flushed. "No, sir," she mumbled. "They don't." "And you, Derek?" Marcus pressed. Derek shifted uncomfortably. "No, sir. They don't." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate your honesty, but words are not enough. Actions matter. Over the next few weeks, I'll be monitoring the store closely. If I see any more behavior like what I witnessed yesterday, there will be consequences." The room remained silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Marcus took a deep breath, his tone softening slightly. "This isn't just about punishment," he said. "It's about growth. We have an opportunity to do better, to be better. I want this store to be a place where anyone can walk in and feel welcome. That's the legacy I want for Echelon Lux." He straightened, his gaze sweeping across the room once more. "I expect nothing less than your best." With that, the meeting was over. Marcus left the room, his steps purposeful. He didn't need to say anything else. The message was clear, and the seeds of change had been planted. As he stepped back into the main store, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about correcting mistakes. It was about building something stronger, something lasting. And he wouldn't stop until Echelon Lux truly embodied the values he had dreamed of from the very beginning. The weight of leadership. Marcus Taylor leaned back in his office chair, the weight of the previous day's events still heavy on his mind. He stared at the city's skyline through the expansive windows, the glittering lights a stark contrast to the darkness of the revelations he had unearthed. Despite the company's outward success, it was clear that cracks had formed in the foundation he had worked so hard to build. The flagship store wasn't just another boutique. It was supposed to be a beacon of the company's values, a place where anyone could walk in and feel like they belonged, regardless of their appearance or background. But Marcus had seen firsthand how those values had been betrayed. Laura and Derek's behavior wasn't just a failure of individual judgment. It was a failure of leadership, one he had to take responsibility for. The intercom on his desk buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. His assistant's voice came through, calm and professional. "Mr. Taylor, Cassandra Wells is here to see you." Marcus sighed, running a hand over his face. He had asked the store manager to meet with him this morning to discuss the next steps. While Cassandra wasn't directly responsible for Laura and Derek's actions, her leadership, or lack thereof, had allowed this culture to fester. "Send her in," he said. The office door opened, and Cassandra stepped inside, her posture straight and her expression composed. She was dressed impeccably, as always in a tailored navy suit. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she approached his desk. "Good morning, Mr. Taylor," she said, her tone measured. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Marcus gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." She did so, folding her hands neatly in her lap. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension palpable. Marcus studied her, noting the slight tension in her shoulders and the way her gaze flicked to the window before settling back on him. "Cassandra," he began, his voice calm but firm, "we need to talk about what happened yesterday." She nodded, her expression serious. I understand, sir. I've already spoken to Laura and Derek about their behavior. They're aware of how unacceptable it was and have assured me it won't happen again. That's a start, Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. But it's not enough. What I witnessed yesterday wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was a symptom of a larger problem. Cassandra frowned, her brow furrowing. A larger problem. Yes, Marcus said. Our company was built on the principle of respect for our customers, our employees, and the values that make us who we are. But somewhere along the way, that message has been lost. And as the leader of this store, it's your responsibility to ensure that those values are upheld. Her posture stiffened slightly, but she nodded. I understand, sir. And I take full responsibility for what happened. Good, Marcus said, because this isn't just about Laura and Derek. It's about creating a culture where this kind of behavior isn't tolerated in the first place, where employees understand that every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity. He leaned back in his chair, his tone softening slightly. Cassandra, I know you're capable. That's why I hired you. But I need you to step up. I need you to lead. Cassandra's expression shifted, a flicker of determination crossing her face. I will, sir. I promise. Actions speak louder than words, Marcus said, his voice firm again. Starting today, we're implementing mandatory training sessions for all employees. These sessions will focus on inclusivity, customer service, and the values that define Echelon Lux. She nodded. Understood. I'll make the arrangements. And one more thing, Marcus added. I'll be visiting the flagship store regularly over the next few weeks. I want to see these changes implemented firsthand. Cassandra's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly nodded again. Of course, sir. I'll make sure everything is up to standard. Marcus stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Cassandra rose as well, smoothing her skirt. Thank you for your time, Mr. Taylor, she said. I won't let you down. I'm counting on you, Cassandra, he said, his tone serious. This store represents more than just our brand. It represents what we stand for. Let's make sure we get it right. As she left the office, Marcus sat back down, his mind already turning to the next steps. This wasn't just about fixing one store. It was about ensuring that every corner of his company reflected the values he had built it on. And while the road ahead would be challenging, Marcus was determined to see it through. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the flagship store unannounced. Dressed in a sharp suit and carrying his leather briefcase, he cut a starkly different figure from the unassuming man in the hoodie who had visited just days before. As he stepped through the glass doors, the familiar chime greeted him, and he was met with the sight of employees bustling about, preparing for the day. Cassandra approached him immediately, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. Good morning, Mr. Taylor, she said. Everything is ready for the first training session. Good, Marcus said, his tone neutral. Let's begin. The employees gathered in the conference room, their expressions ranging from curious to uneasy. Laura and Derek sat near the back, their postures tense. Marcus took a seat at the front of the room, his presence commanding but calm. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice steady. I'm sure you've heard by now about the incident that took place earlier this week. Let me be clear. The behavior I witnessed does not reflect the values of this company, and it will not be tolerated. He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, every eye fixed on him. These training sessions are not a punishment, he continued. They are an opportunity, a chance for us to grow, to learn, and to ensure that we are living up to the standards we set for ourselves. Over the next hour, Marcus outlined the company's mission and values, sharing personal stories of the challenges he had faced while building Echelon Lux. He spoke passionately about the importance of treating every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance or background. As he spoke, he saw the employees' expressions begin to shift. Some nodded in agreement, while others, like Laura and Derek, seemed to reflect on their actions with a newfound sense of accountability. By the end of the session, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. This was only the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. And as he left the conference room, he knew that the true test would come not in words, but in actions. Only time would tell if the seeds of change he had planted would take root and grow. The ripple effect. The sun hung high over Manhattan as Marcus Taylor exited the flagship store, his footsteps purposeful on the bustling city sidewalk. The first training session had concluded, leaving him both hopeful and wary. Words were powerful, but actions mattered more. He had seen flickers of understanding in the employees' eyes during the session, but change wasn't something that happened overnight. It had to be cultivated, nurtured, and enforced. As Marcus made his way to his car, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had started Echelon Luxe with the dream of redefining luxury, not as an exclusive, intimidating concept, but as an experience that welcomed everyone. Yet, somewhere along the way, that dream had been diluted. It wasn't just Laura and Derek who had failed. It was the culture of complacency that he had allowed to fester. Back in his office, Marcus leaned over the polished surface of his desk, reviewing the notes he had taken during the training. His assistant, Elise, entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. "How did it go?" she asked, setting the cup down. Marcus exhaled deeply. "Better than I expected, but it's just the beginning. Changing attitudes takes time." Elise nodded. "Do you think Laura and Derek will change?" "They'll have to," Marcus said firmly, "or they'll have to leave." Elise hesitated, then said, "You know, word about the training is spreading. I've had a few emails from managers at other stores asking if they should implement something similar." Marcus looked up, his interest piqued. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to hold off until you made an official announcement," she said, "but it seems like this is resonating beyond just the flagship store." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good. This isn't just about one store. It's about the entire company. Set up a meeting with the regional managers. I want this initiative to go company-wide." Elise nodded and left the room, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. As he sipped his coffee, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Cassandra, the flagship store manager. "Cassandra. Mr. Taylor, I wanted to let you know that the employees had a lot to say after the session. Some are reflecting deeply, especially Laura and Derek. I think it's starting to sink in." Marcus smiled faintly. Progress, however small, was still progress. A glimpse of change. The next day, Marcus decided to return to the flagship store. This time, he didn't announce his visit. Dressed in his simple blazer and slacks, he blended in with the mid-morning crowd bustling along the streets. He stepped through the familiar glass doors, the scent of polished wood and expensive cologne greeting him. To his surprise, the atmosphere felt different, subtle, but noticeable. Employees moved with a sense of purpose, their conversations quieter and more focused. Laura stood near the jewelry display, helping the young couple select an engagement ring. Her usual haughty demeanor was absent, replaced by a more attentive and professional attitude. Derek, meanwhile, was assisting a middle-aged woman examining handbags, his tone courteous and measured. Marcus lingered near the watches, observing from a distance. A soft voice drew his attention. "Can I help you find something, sir?" He turned to see one of the newer employees, a young man named Adrian. His demeanor was polite but genuine, his smile warm. Marcus nodded, deciding to test the waters. "I'm just browsing," he said. "But thank you." Adrian nodded. "Of course. If you need any assistance, feel free to ask." As Adrian walked away, Marcus felt a flicker of pride. Adrian's behavior reflected the kind of culture Marcus wanted to cultivate, a culture of respect and inclusivity. Before leaving, Marcus approached Cassandra, who was overseeing the floor from a discreet corner. She noticed him immediately and approached with a cautious smile. "Mr. Taylor," she said, "I didn't expect to see you today." "I wanted to see how things were progressing," he said, his gaze sweeping over the store. "And I have to say, I'm impressed. There's a noticeable shift." Cassandra smiled, relief evident in her expression. "Thank you. I've been working closely with the team, especially Laura and Derek. They've been receptive." "Good," Marcus said. "But this is just the beginning. Sustained change requires consistency. Keep the momentum going." Cassandra nodded. "Understood." As Marcus left the store, he felt a sense of cautious optimism. The ripple effect of his actions was beginning to take hold, but the journey was far from over. Expanding the initiative. Over the following weeks, Marcus rolled out the training program across all Echelon Luxe stores. The regional managers were brought in for workshops, where they discussed the importance of customer experience, inclusivity, and ethical leadership. Marcus personally led some of these sessions, sharing his vision and the lessons he had learned from the flagship store incident. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Employees who had felt overlooked or undervalued began to speak up, sharing their own experiences and ideas for improvement. Customers noticed the difference too, leaving glowing reviews about the newfound warmth and professionalism they encountered at Echelon Luxe. One evening, as Marcus reviewed the latest reports, Elise entered his office with a small envelope. "This came for you," she said, handing it over. Marcus opened it to find a handwritten note. It was from the woman who had been mocked by Laura and Derek during his undercover visit to the flagship store. "Dear Mr. Taylor, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the woman with the gift card at your store a few weeks ago. I wanted to thank you for what you've done. I visited the store again recently, and the difference was remarkable. I felt welcome, valued, and respected. I even found the perfect gift for my daughter. Thank you for standing up for people like me. It means more than you know. Sincerely, Margaret Porter." Marcus stared at the note for a long moment, his chest tightening with emotion. This was why he had started Echelon Luxe, not for the profits or the prestige, but for moments like this, moments that reminded him of the impact his company could have on people's lives. As he placed the note in his desk drawer, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. And this time, he wouldn't lose sight of what truly mattered: unforeseen challenges. The success of the new training program began to ripple across Echelon Luxe. Store managers from coast to coast reported improvements in employee morale and customer satisfaction. However, with progress came resistance. Some employees struggled to adapt to the new expectations, clinging to old habits and attitudes. Among them were Laura and Derek. Despite the apparent shift in their behavior during Marcus's last visit, Cassandra confided that both had moments of relapsing into their old ways. Subtle sneers at less affluent-looking customers, half-hearted efforts to assist people they deemed unimportant. It wasn't as overt as before, but it was still there. Marcus knew that true change required more than training. It required accountability and buy-in. One afternoon, Cassandra called Marcus with a troubling update. "Mr. Taylor, I think we have a problem," she said, her voice tense. "What happened?" Marcus asked, his tone sharpening. "It's Laura and Derek. They've been making comments about the training, saying it's unnecessary and that it's overkill. Some of the newer employees are starting to echo them." Marcus frowned, his jaw tightening. This was exactly what he had feared: resistance spreading like a virus. "Have you addressed it?" "I've spoken to them privately, but they're careful not to cross any obvious lines," Cassandra admitted. "It's more about their attitude and the way they talk about the changes." Marcus sighed. "I'll handle it. Schedule a meeting with the entire team tomorrow morning. I'll be there." The meeting that changed everything. The following morning, the employees of the flagship store gathered in the same conference room where the initial training had taken place. There was a palpable tension in the air as Marcus entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. He stood at the front of the room, his expression serious but calm. "Good morning, everyone," he began. I've heard that some of you have concerns about the changes we've implemented. Today, I want to address those concerns directly." He paused, scanning the room. Laura and Derek sat near the back, their postures defensive. Other employees shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the undercurrent of tension. "When I started this company," Marcus continued, "I had a vision. A vision of a luxury brand that wasn't just about exclusivity or wealth, but about creating an experience. An experience where every customer feels valued, no matter who they are. That vision hasn't changed. What has changed is the way we've allowed our values to be overshadowed by arrogance and superficiality." He leaned forward slightly, his tone intensifying. "Let me be clear. This is not a suggestion. This is not optional. Respect, inclusivity, and professionalism are not negotiable at Echelon Luxe. If anyone here feels they cannot uphold these values, I encourage you to reconsider whether this is the right place for you." The room was silent. Laura and Derek exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. "This isn't about punishing anyone," Marcus said, his voice softening. "It's about growth. It's about becoming better, not just as a company, but as individuals. We all have biases, and we all make mistakes. What matters is how we choose to move forward." He straightened, his gaze steady. "I'm giving everyone here the chance to grow, to learn, and to become part of something bigger than themselves. But that choice is yours to make." With that, Marcus ended the meeting, leaving the employees to reflect on his words. As he exited the room, he felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Change was never easy, but he was determined to see it through. The breaking point. Over the next few weeks, Cassandra reported significant improvements among most of the team. Employees who had been skeptical at first began embracing the new culture, and customer feedback continued to improve. However, Laura and Derek remained resistant. One day, Cassandra called Marcus with news he had been dreading. "Mr. Taylor, it's Derek. He refused to help a customer earlier today and made a comment about how they couldn't afford anything in the store anyway." The customer left upset. Marcus felt a surge of frustration, but kept his voice calm. "What about Laura?" "She didn't say anything, but she didn't step in either," Cassandra said. "She just watched." Marcus closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'll handle it. Tell them to meet me in the office tomorrow morning." The next day, Laura and Derek arrived at the office, their expressions guarded. Marcus greeted them with a calm but firm demeanor, gesturing for them to sit. "I've given both of you every opportunity to change," he began. "I've provided training, support, and clear expectations, but yesterday's incident proves that you're unwilling or unable to meet those expectations." Derek opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus held up a hand. "This isn't up for debate. Your actions reflect not just on you, but on the entire company, and I won't allow that." Laura shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Taylor, I've been trying." "Trying isn't enough," Marcus said, cutting her off. "This company demands more than half measures. Effective immediately, your employment with Echelon Luxe is terminated." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Derek looked stunned, while Laura's eyes filled with tears. Marcus didn't waver. "This isn't personal," he said, "but I have a responsibility to this company and to the people who believe in its values. I wish you both the best, but it's clear that this isn't the right place for you." As they left the office, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Letting them go was difficult, but it was necessary. Echelon Luxe couldn't thrive with employees who undermined its mission. That evening, as Marcus sat in his office, he received an email from Cassandra. Subject: "Thank you. Mr. Taylor, I wanted to thank you for your leadership and for making the difficult decisions today. The team feels a renewed sense of purpose, and I believe we're finally on the right path. I'll continue to do my part to uphold the values of Echelon Luxe. Sincerely, Cassandra Wells **. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. The road to change was long and challenging, but for the first time, he felt a true sense of hope. The ripple effect was spreading, and the culture he had dreamed of was finally taking shape. The turning point. Weeks passed after Laura and Derek's departure, leaving a palpable shift in the atmosphere at Echelon Luxe's flagship store. Their absence was more than just a removal of negativity. It was an opportunity for the rest of the team to step into the light, to embrace the values Marcus had championed since the company's inception. For Cassandra, the store manager, it was a chance to reassert her leadership. She wasted no time in rallying the team, scheduling follow-up sessions to reinforce the principles discussed during training. Employees who had once been passive began to engage more actively, contributing ideas and sharing personal experiences that shaped their approach to customer service. But the change was not just internal. Customers noticed the difference too. Reviews on social media and customer satisfaction surveys began to highlight the newfound warmth and professionalism of the staff. One particularly glowing review caught Marcus's attention during his nightly review of reports. "I shopped at Echelon Luxe for years, but something feels different lately, in the best way. The staff is attentive and kind, and they make you feel like you belong, no matter your budget. It's clear they're not just selling products, they're selling an experience. Kudos to the team for embodying true luxury." Marcus read the review twice, a small smile playing on his lips. These were the stories he wanted to hear, the proof that his vision was taking root. But he knew the work wasn't done. Culture wasn't a destination. It was a journey, a test of principles. As the flagship store began to flourish, a new challenge arose. One afternoon, Cassandra called Marcus with an update that tested the very values they were working to instill. "Mr. Taylor, there's an issue with one of our most loyal VIP customers," she began, her tone hesitant. Marcus frowned. "What kind of issue?" "It's Mrs. Davenport," Cassandra explained. "She's been a regular for years, but today she caused a scene. She openly criticized one of our younger employees, Adrian, claiming he wasn't knowledgeable enough to assist her. She demanded he be reassigned to another department." Marcus sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Davenport was a prominent socialite and one of the store's highest spending clients. Her loyalty to Echelon Luxe was well documented, but her sharp tongue and sense of entitlement often made her interactions with staff challenging. "How did Adrian handle it?" Marcus asked. "Admirably," Cassandra said, her tone lifting slightly. "He remained calm and professional, even as she raised her voice. But I could tell he was shaken." "And how did you respond?" Marcus pressed. "I politely but firmly reminded Mrs. Davenport that all of our employees are trained to the highest standards and are here to serve all customers equally," Cassandra said. She wasn't happy, but she eventually left. "Good," Marcus said. "You handled it well. But this is a teachable moment for everyone." A team meeting. The following morning, Marcus gathered the flagship store team for a meeting. Cassandra had already briefed the group on the incident with Mrs. Davenport, and Adrian sat quietly near the back, his usually confident demeanor subdued. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus began, his tone calm but resolute. "I want to address what happened yesterday with Mrs. Davenport." The room was silent, all eyes on him. "First, I want to commend Adrian for handling the situation with professionalism and grace," Marcus continued, nodding toward the young employee. "Dealing with difficult customers is never easy, but you set an example for all of us." Adrian gave a small, appreciative smile, though his discomfort was still evident. "But I also want to make something clear," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. "Echelon Luxe does not compromise its values, not for anyone. Respect is not a privilege reserved for a select few. It's a standard that applies to everyone, whether they're a customer, an employee, or a passerby." He paused, letting his words sink in. This company was built on the belief that luxury is not about exclusion. It's about inclusion. And that means standing by our people, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. The employees nodded, their expressions a mix of understanding and pride. "Mrs. Davenport is a valued customer," Marcus continued, "but her loyalty does not give her the right to demean or belittle anyone on this team. If we allow exceptions to our principles, we undermine everything we've worked to build." He turned to Adrian. "You did the right thing, and I want you to know that we have your back. Don't let one person's negativity shake your confidence. You belong here." Adrian's face lit up with gratitude, and a ripple of quiet applause spread through the room. The aftermath. Later that day, Marcus received an email from Mrs. Davenport. It was short but telling. "Mr. Taylor, I was disappointed with my experience yesterday. While I understand your company's commitment to customer service, I believe the level of expertise I expect as a loyal client was not met. I hope you will address this matter appropriately. Sincerely, Evelyn Davenport." Marcus stared at the screen for a moment, then began typing his response. ****, Dear Mrs. Davenport, thank you for your feedback. I value your loyalty to Echelon Lux and appreciate the time you've taken to share your concerns. However, I must respectfully disagree with your assessment of our team. Our employees undergo rigorous training to ensure they provide the highest level of service to all clients. Adrian's professionalism and expertise are exemplary, and I stand by his ability to assist any customer, including yourself. At Echelon Lux, we believe luxury is about more than just products. It's about creating an experience that values every individual. I hope we can continue to serve you in the future and provide the exceptional experience you've come to expect from us. Sincerely, Marcus Taylor, CEO, Echelon Lux ****. After sending the email, Marcus leaned back in his chair satisfied. Standing by his team, even in the face of a powerful client, was a necessary step in reinforcing the company's values. A renewed purpose. By the end of the week, Adrian's confidence had returned, bolstered by Marcus's support and the encouragement of his colleagues. Customers continued to praise the store's welcoming atmosphere, and sales climbed steadily. The incident with Mrs. Davenport, rather than being a setback, became a rallying point for the team, a reminder of the kind of company they were building. One evening, as Marcus reviewed the latest customer feedback, he came across another handwritten note. "Dear Mr. Taylor, I had the pleasure of visiting your flagship store this week, and I was truly impressed. The staff was attentive, kind, and knowledgeable. It's clear that Echelon Lux values not just luxury, but people. Thank you for creating such a remarkable experience. Sincerely, a grateful customer." Marcus smiled, folding the note and placing it in his desk drawer alongside the others he had received in recent weeks. The journey to rebuild the company's culture was far from over, but moments like these reminded him that it was worth every challenge. As he gazed out at the city skyline, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Echelon Lux was no longer just a brand, it was a movement, and he was more determined than ever to ensure it stayed that way. The legacy rebuilt. The flagship store buzzed with life as the holiday season approached. Echelon Lux had fully embraced its transformation, with employees radiating warmth and professionalism. The once toxic undercurrent that had threatened the company's integrity was now replaced by a palpable sense of pride and camaraderie. Marcus Taylor often visited the store unannounced, walking through its aisles and quietly observing the fruits of his labor. This morning, however, was different. Marcus wasn't there to observe, he was there to celebrate. The recognition ceremony. The store's staff had gathered in the conference room, their usual workday uniforms swapped for more festive attire. The air was filled with anticipation. Cassandra Wells, the store manager, stood at the front of the room, beaming with pride as she introduced Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, "today we're here to recognize the incredible strides this team has made. Mr. Taylor's leadership has been instrumental in guiding us, but let's not forget that it's your hard work and dedication that have brought us to where we are now." Marcus stepped forward, the room falling silent as he took the podium. His presence was commanding yet approachable, a reflection of the leader he had become. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice resonant. "When I first walked into this store a few months ago, it was with the hope of finding something extraordinary. What I found instead was a challenge, an opportunity to redefine what Echelon Lux stands for, and I'm proud to say that you've risen to that challenge." The employees exchanged smiles, some nodding in agreement. "We've come a long way," Marcus continued. "From the changes we've made in how we interact with customers to the sense of community we've built among ourselves. This store is now a beacon of what Echelon Lux represents, and that's because of you." He paused, letting his words sink in before gesturing toward Cassandra. "I'd like to take a moment to recognize Cassandra Wells, whose leadership has been instrumental in steering this team through uncertain times. Cassandra, your dedication and resilience are a testament to what true leadership looks like." The room erupted in applause as Cassandra stepped forward, her face glowing with gratitude. She shook Marcus's hand, then addressed the room. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor, and thank you to all of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just my achievement, it's ours. Together, we've shown what's possible when we commit to excellence and respect." As the applause died down, Marcus turned his attention to another part of the room. "There's one more person I'd like to recognize today. Adrian, would you please come up here?" The young employee hesitated, his face flushing with surprise, but the encouragement from his colleagues pushed him forward. Marcus met him with a firm handshake and a smile. "Adrian," Marcus began, "a few weeks ago, you faced a difficult situation with grace and professionalism. Your actions not only upheld the values of this company, but also inspired others to do the same. I want to thank you for embodying what Echelon Lux is all about." Adrian's eyes glistened as he accepted the recognition. The applause that followed was thunderous, a testament to the respect he had earned from his peers. Facing the next frontier. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus lingered in the store, watching the team return to their stations with a renewed sense of purpose. Cassandra approached him, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Mr. Taylor," she said, "this isn't just a job anymore. It feels like we're part of something bigger." Marcus smiled. "That's the goal. Luxury isn't about exclusivity. It's about creating a sense of belonging. And you've made that vision a reality." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as Adrian expertly assisted a customer browsing watches. Cassandra spoke again, her tone hesitant. "Do you think the changes we've made here will last?" Marcus looked at her, his expression resolute. "Yes, because we've built something stronger than policies or procedures. We've built a culture. And as long as we keep nurturing it, it will last." A surprise encounter. Later that afternoon, Marcus was preparing to leave when a familiar face walked into the store. Margaret Porter, the woman whose initial experience had been the catalyst for the company's transformation. She looked around, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Marcus approached her with a warm smile. "Mrs. Porter, it's good to see you again." She turned, her eyes widening in recognition. "Mr. Taylor, I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm here quite often," he said, his tone light. "What brings you in today?" She hesitated, then held up a small shopping bag. "I wanted to stop by and see if things had changed." "I'm happy to say they have." Marcus's smile deepened. "I'm glad to hear that. How was your experience today?" "Wonderful," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "The staff was kind and attentive. It's clear they've made real changes." "Thank you for giving us another chance," Marcus said sincerely. "Your feedback helped us grow, and I'm grateful for it." Margaret smiled, her gaze softening. "It's rare to see someone in your position care so deeply. You've earned a loyal customer." The vision realized. That evening, Marcus returned to his office and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. He opened his desk drawer, pulling out the collection of handwritten notes and glowing reviews from customers who had witnessed Echelon Lux's transformation. Each one was a testament to the power of integrity and leadership. For Marcus, this journey had been more than a test of his company. It had been a test of himself. The decisions he had made, the risks he had taken, and the values he had fought for had all led to this moment. Echelon Luxe was no longer just a brand. It was a legacy. As he placed the notes back in the drawer, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his heart full. The road to change had been long and challenging, but it had been worth every step. And as he closed his eyes, he knew one thing for certain. The future of Echelon Luxe was brighter than ever.